They said it was an accident when she first moved in. A small white house with a crooked fence, roses choking the mailbox, and a smile that could make the sun look insecure. For 5 years, HOA Karen lived on my land. She paid the mortgage and the taxes, she took the mail, she watered the plants. And she smiled at anyone who rescued a dog or returned a lost cat. She waved at the school bus. She hosted yard sales and barbecues. She rented a storage shed from me for a while and borrowed my ladder and my pressure washer, and never once asked for favors she did not intend to repay. What I did not sign up for, and what took months to reveal itself, was the cottage industry of rules and edicts she built inside her head. At first, they were tiny things, like passive-aggressive sticky notes left on the communal mailbox, or a suggestion to move the garden gnomes a foot to the left. Then they grew teeth. There is a certain smell in a neighborhood the moment someone believes they own it. It is not the smell of money or success. It is the smell of entitlement mixed with the perfume of someone who never learned the word compromise. HOA Karen smelled like that. She would stand at the end of my driveway with her arms folded and lecture my dog, as if the mutt had been appointed to run for office and lost. We tolerated it because we were kind, or because we were tired, or because we hoped she would tire of ruling everyone as she had the first winter. For 5 years, I let her be. I let the small things slide. A complaint here, a threat by email there. She wrote letters that began with "Dear Neighbor" and ended with consequences, and the people who read them felt the room cool. The house was small. My land was not. There was a fence line, an old rusted gate, a plum tree I planted when my daughter was born. The property line was clear in the county records, and on the faded survey map tucked away in my filing cabinet. I paid attention to those papers. HOA Karen did not. She believed that proximity and volume equaled control. When she noticed a little patch of my land she liked, she started sprinkling mulch, planting hostas, and arranging solar lights like tiny watchmen guarding a plot she imagined belonged to her. Neighbors whispered. I tried to be diplomatic. We shared tools and cookies and the kind of neighborly life that gives small towns their stories. But events multiplied, and the grievances got more elaborate. She accused me of blocking sunlight because I pruned the plum tree to keep it from strangling the fence. She accused me of trespassing when my son and I built a little treehouse on a portion of the land that was, by every legal metric, ours. She called the county about my chickens, despite my having a permit tucked in the drawer. She called the police about a barbecue grill one excessively warm Thursday because she said smoke crossed an invisible line in the air. The first time she summoned me to a supposed HOA meeting, it felt like an ambush. She arrived with a binder of rules she wrote herself, photocopied on cheap paper, stapled like evidence in a trial. Neighbor after neighbor showed up, and she sat in the folding chair at the head of the driveway as if she had been elected mayor. She demanded signatures for a new covenant that would cover the entire block, and she handed me a pen like an ultimatum. When I refused, she smiled and said the pen still worked, which made everyone laugh nervously and scared me a little. For months the pressure mounted. Notices, threats of fines. A flyer slipped under my door warning that noncompliance would result in liens. She had collected a posse of worried neighbors who had not yet learned the drafting of concern into command. The county sent a letter asking for clarification about the HOA formation because you cannot just create a homeowners association and mandate dues overnight and expect the world to bend. The letter sat in her laundry basket where she accused the dryer of stealing socks and never lost its power to make her indignant. I worked nights and came home to find my mailbox rearranged with a flyer declaring that the neighborhood aesthetic must be preserved. It was me who bought the mailbox years before. It carried our mail, our secrets, and my daughter's birthday cards. She painted the post a different color one Saturday when I was at work and left a note that read "Community Improvement." I painted it back at midnight, under a sky that had more stars than I had patience. My patience is not infinite, but it is longer than you might expect from someone pushed to defend what is theirs. The point of no return came on an ordinary Tuesday. Like most big moments in life, I was pruning the plum tree that morning because deadwood weakens branches and branches can fall and hurt someone. HOA Karen arrived with a camera and a stopwatch as if pruning could be measured in milliseconds and guilt could be captured in JPEG format. She claimed I had cut too far into the property line and positioned herself as a living border survey. She recorded my every move and later edited the footage into a narrative she would email to neighbors with commentary like a courtroom stenographer. Replace the limbs. Imagine telling someone to sew new pages into a book that has been written for decades. I refused. Her face hardened into the expression I know well now, the look of pure conviction where someone believes they are correcting a world that only seems broken to others. She threatened to sue, to fine, to ostracize. She wrote to my boss. She called the school. She called the pastor. She called the woman at the corner store. She was everywhere. But there is a funny thing about being the wronged person and remaining calm. People notice. A few neighbors who had been quiet started leaving their lawn chairs at the end of their driveways to watch the afternoons. They did not always speak, but their presence was a mirror. There are also legalities. When someone starts acting like an HOA, records become your ally. I dug out my deed, my tax receipts, my county permits. I learned the exact lines of my property and the right to set a tree where I pleased. I photographed the fence, the mailbox, the shed, the part of the yard she had tried to claim like a kingdom. I am not a vindictive person. I am stubborn and slow to anger, fortunate enough to prefer coffee over confrontation. I use lawyers like light switches, when necessary, not as a default. A quiet, concise letter from an attorney does very strange things to the confidence of a person who thinks the law is what they write during bedtime. The letter laid out a timeline, a simple request. Cease and desist the unauthorized actions on private property, remove any signage, return anything taken, and stop presenting herself as a neighborhood authority without proper formation. Her reaction was theatrical. She convened a meeting to discuss the aggression from an ungrateful landowner. She painted my family as outsiders, as troublemakers bringing chaos to a peaceful enclave. She rallied a handful of neighbors who liked the sound of authority and the feel of paperwork. Her command center grew sticky notes and PowerPoint slides. She rented a projector from the library and showed photos of our yard as evidence of slovenly behavior. She used the word community until it meant whatever she wanted it to mean that day. Then she made a fatal mistake. She filed, with great fanfare, for an HOA membership requirement for properties on our block. It was a document she presented at her meeting as if notarized by destiny. She ignored the fact that creating such a binding covenant required signatures from a threshold of property owners and needed to follow specific county procedures. The county clerk, an efficient woman with 2 children and no patience for hobbyist bureaucracy, called her out in polite terms. The document was not recorded, it was not supported by the necessary consents, and it had no place in legal reality. But she would not stop. When the law stood in her way, she tried the social route. She began listing small infractions she claimed we committed. Garbage bins visible on certain days, hedges cut at the wrong height, and the egregious offense of not attending a neighborhood potluck she hosted. She put notes on cars and sent emails with subject lines like failure to comply. People felt watched. A few, embarrassed, started nodding in her direction even when they disagreed, because survival in small communities can make people do strange things. The pivot came when she demanded that I join her HOA. For 5 years, HOA Karen had lived on my land without a formal agreement, without payment, or owner signatures, enjoying the privileges of proximity and the illusion of influence. Now she wanted to convert that illusion into dues, into fees, into a neat little line item on my monthly budget. She produced a form with a space for my signature, a list of fines, and a schedule for inspection. The demand was ridiculous on its face. You cannot retroactively create obligations that were never legally established. I refused to sign. I refused to be bullied into paying for governance that had not been lawfully established. Her face, when I told her so, was a mixture of disbelief and something like wounded pride. You could see in her eyes a little collapse. The kind of collapse that happens when entitlement meets reality. She ramped up her tactics. She sent a certified letter, which I accepted because rules matter. The certified letter accused me of undermining community harmony and demanded compliance. Within 10 days, which felt more like theatrical timing than any legal standard, I sought the counsel of the county. I walked into the office on a rainy morning with my hair damp and my hands possibly shaking. The clerk sat me down, and she explained, kindly and clearly, that HOA-like rules require transparent formation, recorded covenants, signatures, and notices. If someone invents an HOA in their dining room and starts demanding money, the county will not validate it. It was a relief, yes, but it was also an invitation to act. I gathered the paperwork, the deeds, the photographs, the list of times she entered my property without consent, and the witnesses who would testify about the ways she used her voice as a weapon. I wrote down every incident like a surgeon cataloging symptoms. My attorney drafted a complaint, asking for a declaratory judgment that there was no valid HOA covenant, and for an injunction prohibiting her from presenting herself as the neighborhood authority. It was not revenge. It was an attempt to stop the escalation before it became something worse. When the case was filed, Neighborly conversations changed. People began to talk openly about the ways HOA Karen had interfered with barbecues and block parties with new roofs and paint colors, with how a man who took in foster kids was threatened because she thought his porch light was too bright. Stories came forward that made the pattern clearer. She claimed to be saving the neighborhood from decline while she was the engine of decline for other families. The court date arrived on a sun-bright morning. HOA Karen dressed in what she had always worn when she wanted to be imposing. A blouse, pressed like a flag, and a necklace that glittered with the solemnity of authority. She arrived with a stack of printed complaints from neighbors and the binder she favored as if script and staples could make law. Her supporters sat behind her like a chorus. I sat with my family and the neighbors who had seen the slow erosion of civility. My lawyer was calm. The judge was efficient, a person who had dealt with people who confused desire with right more times than they could count. "Listen carefully," said the judge, who had the precise rhythm of someone used to trimming long stories into short ones. "The question is not whether Miss Karen dislikes your plum tree or disapproves of your mailbox. The question is whether she has the lawful authority she claims." Evidence spoke. Record spoke. The judge reviewed the county clerk's notes and the survey maps and the absence of any recorded covenant. HOA Karen found herself offering statements about aesthetic standards she believed in but could not legally impose. When the judge ruled, it was one of those quiet verdicts that land like an unexpected rain. He declared that the purported HOA had no binding authority over my property because the required formation steps had not been followed. He issued an injunction ordering her to cease representing herself as an HOA official and to remove any signs or documents that suggested otherwise. He also ordered mediation to resolve any ongoing disputes. It was measured, not theatrical. It was justice, not revenge. The aftermath was strange. For weeks, she kept to herself, painting fewer mailboxes and staying out of potlucks. When she returned, she tried to redirect her energy into volunteer projects. Mindful Neighborhood had seen the line she had crossed. I accepted the outcome the way someone accepts a healed scar, with a quiet sense of survival and gratitude for routine's return. But there was a lesson we all learned. Documentation matters. County records matter. The polite fog of neighborliness is not protection against systematic incursions of power. The tilt of a mailbox or the height of a hedge can be weaponized by those who know how to make rules in the absence of law. HOA Karen stayed in her house for a while. She made some gestures toward neighborliness, small and calculated, like a person who knew the spotlight had shifted. Eventually, she sold the house and moved. She tried briefly to form a homeowners association in her new town, but that is another story and a different judge. As for me, I kept the plum tree. I left the mailbox with its original paint. I installed a little plaque with nothing on it but a small image of a bird. Mostly I let life continue. We had a block party that summer, and children ran in the street and adults laughed in ways that did not require someone to enforce a smile. HOA Karen's attempt to claim authority taught us not only to defend our property but to defend the idea that being a neighbor is a choice, not a contract forced on someone by the loudest voice. Years later, people still mention her name. They tell the story like a warning and a kind of myth, the woman who lived 5 years on someone else's land and tried to sign them up for a club they never wanted. It is a tale that tastes like justice because the outcome felt fair, but it is also a reminder. Civility is fragile, and the rule of law is often the best neighbor you can have.